molten, and that's about as far as it goes. And we never think about exactly how that affects our lives or could affect our lives. And you had decided at some point in your long and fruitful life, short and fruitful life,
Eventful life, yeah.
that volcanology is important. Why? Why did you go into this field?
Yeah, I mean, it's even important in the context you just raised. Like there are 5,000 tourists climbing the side of Kilauea every day, and they expect spectacle, but they don't expect danger. And so I became interested because I was a New Zealander. I'd worked in the portion of New Zealand which has active volcanoes, and it just grabbed me early on. Middle of the North, very middle of the North Island, very, very heart of the country.
Knew that, yes.
Yeah. And then I had a really inspirational lecturer at university, and he really inspired me. He showed, in those days, movies. Now we use videos, but it had the same effect. So.
It's funny. I mean, so often, I ask that question to everybody, Bruce, what got you into this? And I get a lot of different answers, but so often, really, it's one teacher got me into this. So tell us about that teacher.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy who had been a high school teacher, had moved to the university, had no real research career himself, but he was just a very inspired teacher. And he stood up there and he spoke from the heart, and he really grabbed my attention. And actually, you have to go back one step to another inspirational teacher, but in the New Zealand school system, you specialise very early. In your third year of high school, you're pretty much a specialist.
Really?
And I was denied access to geography in my fourth year because they said, no, you're going to do chemistry, mathematics, physics, applied mathematics, and English.
Is this like a special advanced rapid program kind of thing?
Yeah, well, they channeled everybody down certain paths, and they decided I was an engineer, rightly or wrongly. And I so resented this loss of geography. That got me into the class with this other guy, Ernie Searle, and that sold me. But then there's a lot of serendipity on the path. I mean, in 10 years, there was one volcanologist hired in New Zealand in the 10 years from when I graduated. And so, I was just lucky. I got that opportunity.
Who was the hiring employer that would only hire one in 10 years?
Oh, they didn't have any money. They would have hired 1,000 if they could, or maybe not. But no, it was the New Zealand equivalent of the US Geological Survey. So before I came here, I headed up the equivalent of the Volcano Hazards Program in the US and the equivalent of the Hawaii Volcano Observatory in New Zealand.
Ergo, let me check this out. Ergo, you have something to do with the disaster organization here now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's serendipity again. I've had so many lucky opportunities, and I've grabbed them instantly. But when they started up NDPDC, the National Disaster Preparedness Training Centre here, Carl Kim, the director, asked me if I'd be the science director, and that was in part because I had started working in New Zealand. We had a big eruption. We issued magnificent warnings that we thought were written by William Shakespeare. And my God, people did amazingly inappropriate things. People went all the wrong ways. And we said, it can't be us. Naturally, it had to be them. So we turned to psychology and sociology to help us. And
how wonderful!
Yeah, right. And it did
the
help.
Weather Service could learn something from you.
Yeah.
Flash flood warning.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we behaved the same way. And so I started doing research on the side as a closet social scientist. And so worked on the big Indian Ocean tsunami as well as eruptions. And so that was what Carl picked up on when he was looking for a science leader for the disaster centre.
So what's your principal position now?
It's hard. There is that title of the science director for the disaster centre, but my other title is Gordon A. Macdonald Professor of Volcanology, and that carries with it the state volcanologist title, which is not as spectacular as it sounds. The day-to-day advice is handled between the Volcano Observatory, who are federal, and the county, but I'm in effect the state's advisor if the state chooses to be advised.
I was going to ask. I mean, when's the last time that happened, eh?
Well, it's because we've got such a benign eruption, Jay. And you said, the tourists walking up and dabbling their toes. And I mean, the eruption is so easily managed most of the time that it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
I mean, I get involved in longer term things. Like a few years back, they did a lava flow mitigation report, and that's the slow, insidious problem on the Big Island, is the consumption of highway and homes by lava flows. It's almost never going to kill anybody. It's not even going to be as much of a nuisance as the VOG is that you dealt with in a previous program. But it's the dollar cruncher.
I don't know why, but your comment made me think of the Brooklyn Bridge. And people jump off the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
So can you imagine somebody who feels suicidal? He lies down in the middle of a road, and the lava's coming, but it's not coming fast enough. He loses patience and he goes home.
Go somewhere else. Yeah.
So what is the relationship of all of this with my friend Don Thomas? You work with him? Do you know him?
Yeah, no, I know Don well. Don has a couple of roles, and one of them is heading up CSAVE, the Centre for the Study of Active Volcanoes. That's a teaching facility on the Big Island. It teaches graduates and undergraduates from mainland colleges on one hand. It teaches professional volcanologists, particularly from developing world countries, on the other. I teach my own graduate students, but mostly I do research. And so what I do research on is volcano explosions, what drives explosions, what makes Kilauea very mild and St. Helens very violent, those sort of issues.
It's clearly the most explosive area within volcanology.
Yes, and it attracts the most explosive people. So the shortest fuses anyway. So, yeah.
But all of this is around SOAST. I mean, SOAST is the mothership on volcanology. I mean, because it's the School of Ocean and Earth Science.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm a SOAST professor in amongst all of the rest of that.
So when you teach, what kind of courses do you teach? Is it graduate school? It's only graduate courses?
No, I teach three. I teach simple physics of volcanoes to undergraduates with no math. And then I co-teach with a colleague an advanced course for the graduate students where we feed math into it. And then I teach across the School of Social Science and SOAST an all natural hazard course. And that's as much social science as it is physical science. We just take big disasters and we analyze them detail by detail. What drove the problem in a behavioral sense, what drove the problem from perspective of the physics of the weather system or the fault line or whatever, and mingle all that up together.
That's fascinating. A connection between social science and science. I mean, it's always fascinating to find that.
It's taken a while to catch on that there should be a robust connection, but NSF at the moment are throwing quite large sums of money at just that connection. So they're throwing $3 million awards at people who can demonstrate that they have all the disciplines on side. So not just social and physical science, but economists, statisticians, and everything. So we're in the process. We got a seed money to start one of these on volcanoes, and come February we'll put in a full proposal asking for the $3 million.
So what is that? What is? I think I have an idea, but I'll take a wild guess at it. We were talking before the show about traffic, about how congestion, it's not just congestion, it's many, many vectors coming together, and in large part it's social science, why people get stuck on the road, why they behave the way they do, as a community of drivers. So the same thing here. I mean, why does the community behave as the way it does or would in the face of, say, a volcanic explosion?
Exactly, right? And how can we tweak that? How without trying to climb inside people's heads, can we just make the response a little bit better? Or what are the right words versus the wrong words? So it's actually called reducing uncertainty in volcanic crises, but it's equal part psychology, sociology on one hand, and then physical science and statistics on the other.
So for this kind of analysis, you really have to bring both disciplines together. But when you're dealing with the volcanologist side of it and the explosion side of it, you have to make certain assumptions because it's hard to say exactly, when or what will happen with a volcano. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, tell
right.
me. But
yeah, no, that's half of the uncertainty. Half of the uncertainty is the volcano, the other half is the community. And so,
which is also uncertain.
which is even more uncertain. But it's the nature of those assumptions and how good are they? How much error is there when we say, okay, this volcano will erupt at this intensity with this energy level? Have we got that right? Plus or minus 2%, plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 100%, and can we get it more precise? And that we're getting a lot better at that. We're not perfect at that. We have a better picture the closer things get to the surface. All right,
Literally.
literally anything deeper than 5 kilometers is very, very hazy for us. And so we're looking for other ways of getting into that early history of an eruption before it even knows it's an eruption.
Sure, and you go back historically and look and see what happened and piece together,
Yeah,
what
that's
it
right.
might have been like to be there when it happened.
Yep, and we also go forward. So a lot of the time we're sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for something else to happen. That's what drew me here, was the fact that Kilauea offers you something, often it's pretty small, pretty weak, practically any day of the year. And so that creates a laboratory on the scale that you need. And there are others, like the Stromboli in Italy. There's one in the New Hebrides called Yasua, where you can go any day and observe something and hope basically to understand it just one step better, every time you do.
Well, it strikes me that what you are doing is not just about volcanoes. And it's not just about social responses to volcanoes. It's about all crises.
Yeah.
It's about all natural crises, and I suppose you could say it's about all crises. It's taking an assumed disaster, explosion, what have you, and then watching people respond to that, and then figuring out ways to ameliorate it somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, it's a lot of it is common to any form of disaster. You could take nature away and just consider a chemical spill as a disaster, or
Nuclear blast.
yeah, I mean, like one of the and sometimes they hang off each other, like in Japan. You had the earthquake off Tohoku, followed by the tsunami, and then followed by the Fukushima nuclear crisis. So they all hang one off each other. But one of the most critical things is just getting people to react faster. And one of the fascinating things, I learned all sorts of new words from the social scientists. They had words for things that you and I know instinctively influence how we make our decisions. But one of the critical things, they call it either mulling, as in mulling over, or confirmation. And they say it doesn't matter how respected you, Jay, are as a messenger. If you were to broadcast on television, please go and seek high ground, there's going to be a tsunami. Nobody will react instantly. What they do is they consider it. And particularly in this age of social media, they tweet, they pick up the cell phone, they text, and a lot of the time people need 3 or 4 confirmations of the message before they actually react.
It's so interesting. The points you are making about this, about taking the volcano explosion and then doing social science around it, applies to things that are happening right now. 2 examples come to mind. One is the people in Gaza. They get leaflets. It's going to blow up your building, and they look for confirmation. They don't get confirmation. The Gaza government, Hamas, says, "No, stay in your building. It doesn't matter. Ignore the Israelis." And then they blow up the building. So seeking confirmation sometimes may be fatal.
Yes, because you get the wrong message. Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that comes to mind is these, what do you want to call them, emergency workers in Ukraine, who aren't really emergency workers at all, who know nothing about how to deal with a plane crash and how to deal with dead bodies and all the fallout, literally, of the plane crash, are now in charge of that field. They're doing that, and they're doing it badly. And what comes to mind, and they're not allowing anybody else to help them.
Right. Yeah.
What comes to mind is the notion that if you're going to be a responder on any of these crises, you have to have some education.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and tools. You know, you have to be given tools to react, because nobody can carry everything in their head. I mean, not every emergency manager is going to carry the response plan for the crash of an airliner. You know, but to know where to go and what to get.
Yeah.
One of the nicest things that I've seen recently is in this context of false messaging and false confirmations, is watching the way in which FEMA and state and county agencies are grabbing social media and using it themselves. You know, they're accepting, okay, a lot of the second warnings, the second messages are going to be coming from these relatively informal sources.
The confirmation
Yeah,
messages.
right. Rather than trying to cut them off and deny them, as they're denying access to the workers in the Ukraine, instead they're seizing those. And so suddenly what comes on your Facebook comes from the State Emergency Management Office, as well as from all of your Facebook friends. And you know, that's to me, that's really exciting, because that's adaptation, you know, as opposed to putting your head in the sand and saying, we're going to do it the way we always do it. Our messages will be delivered by radio and television, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So
the
it's a
old
really
days are
dynamic
gone.
world.
Social media is here, but then perversity is here too, where you could, you know, the wrong people are going to say the wrong thing on
Yeah.
social media. Say, you know, for example, in the Gaza, you know, example, don't go, stay.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
probably delivered in very
yeah.
effective ways.
Yes, yeah, and they are the people who are well known to the people receiving the message. I mean, if you have a choice between heading an unknown Israeli official and heading a member of Hamas who lives on your street, it's pretty clear, you know, which message you'll take, at least initially, until the bombs start falling.
Are you studying all of this? This is pretty
No,
heavy
no,
stuff.
not at all. No. Well, I stick clear of man-made disasters, man-influenced disasters a lot. But yeah, and you can't study all of those. I mean,
No,
it's
there's too many disciplines.
Yeah, it's
you know,
hard-
there's
yeah.
a point where you have too many disciplines in play.
Yeah, that's right, and yeah, for a lot of reasons, and also you tend to get spread geographically. You know, for our big proposal, we have people from Texas to Maine to Berkeley to Hawaii in the loop, and you know, even getting into one time zone that works in order to talk is tricky. And then when you talk, people speak different languages. You know, it's another lesson we learned in the volcano world. You know, don't send foreigners like me into a community to deliver the message. It's not going to work. It's got to come locally.
That's Bruce Houghton. He's a volcanologist with SOAS. The subject of our discussion is volcanologists are not only in Star Trek. We're still using that as a subject.
Right. Yeah, we won't adhere to it.
We're not. We're going to stay with that. And we'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, my name is Willow
So,
Chang
I'd like
and
to-
I host a show
I'd
called
like to
The
ask
Art
you
of
about
Life.
the
We air
research.
live every
And,
Friday
you know,
from
tell
2
them
to
in your
3
own
p.m.
words. I mean,
And what we
scientific
do is
words.
basically we
What it's
focus
like,
on
including the
individuals who
geography.
create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These
No,
are
okay.
movers
Well,
and
we
shakers,
can- if-
artists,
if it's
innovators.
okay with
they're
you,
also
we can
the
flip it
visualists.
around.
One second.
They're all involved in the archival process,
What?
and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community. We're keeping it Pono.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here. I'm Jay Fidell on ThinkTech Talks. We're on the SOAS Hour, the School of Ocean, Earth Science and Technology at UH Manoa. We're talking with Bruce Houghton, who's a volcanologist. I think a lot of people out there would like to be volcanologists, honestly. We're talking about the fact that volcanologists are not only on Star Trek. There are many legitimate volcanologists who are not on Star Trek.
Yeah, we have their feet on the ground. Yeah.
Better on the ground than, never mind. So I wanted to ask you, you know, to sort of report on your latest research. What's it like? What's the hypothesis you're working under? What's the you know, what are the instruments? Do you go down in the bowels of the earth like a coal miner, seeking to find something in some hot, you know, very hot
gassy
chamber?
place.
Hot.
Yeah.
What is it like?
Yeah, it's we get close, but we don't get into the bowels. I have to say, I'm a physical volcanologist. I tend to make measurements of what is being erupted from the volcano, at what speed, where it's going. Our world changed drastically when really high-speed cameras were discovered and were constructed sufficiently robustly that you could take them onto a volcano. And so a couple of Italian guys did that in 2009, 2010 on Stromboli volcano. And when I saw their results, I thought, we have to be in on this. So we were very lucky. We got support from the Dean and from NSF, and we bought our own little high-speed camera. And I call it Precious because it's back to the Lord of the Rings New Zealand roots, and it is very precious because it can record up to 1,200 frames per second, which means it sees things I never see, you would never see. It can get inside volcanic eruptions, and what interests us a lot is what happens in the last few hundred feet before an eruption breaks the surface, and does that drive what's happening? And eruptions are this uneasy mixture of the gas which was originally dissolved in the molten rock and the rock itself. By the time it gets to that sort of depth, it's big bubbles surrounded by liquid, bubbles bursting through liquid, bubbles colliding with each other. And we just can't see that fast enough with our eye. When we put these high-speed cameras out, we can then slow up the film and see a lot of fine detail. And so we get these little clips in time, maybe 20, 30 seconds of activity, and we can go inside them in a great deal of detail. Someday we'll be able to take much longer movies, but a 10-second video is 10 gigabytes. One second of filming is a gigabyte, and so that really makes it difficult. So I know if we could possibly line up one of the two video clips that I brought in, we could see this in action.
Let's do that. Let's see, what did you call it? What number?
I think it's the one with G at the start and slow at the end. No, C at the start and G and slow at the end on the file name.
Here we go.
Here we go. So this is a little explosion taking place from Kilauea just in December this year. December last year, last December. It's right on the edge of the lava lake in Halemaumau. And what you can see there is these fountains of gas and liquid rock bursting up through, but we're doing it at about 1/20th the normal speed. So if we just saw that, it would be just a blur of bright, hot material. When we see it at this speed, we can see that there's many different little bubbles bursting. You can often see there's 2 or 3 different yellow-white areas, which are where the hot gas is coming out. So we just climb inside this and we measure the amount of gas involved, the temperature of the gas involved, the speed which the gas is being released. And what we're ultimately trying to do is work out, when did that happen? Where did that start? Did it start 20 feet below the surface, 200 feet below the surface, 2,000 feet below the surface? The answer is more like the 200. So the next thing that we're doing in conjunction with that is we've been doing this with multiple cameras side by side, but we don't really know what the gas is. And so now we're linking up with a team from University of Cambridge and a team from Pisa in Italy to actually have high-speed gas sensors so that we'll be able to measure what type of gas, what we think is different gases come out at different times. And so what our notion is just a much more tightly constrained picture for what's happening with Halemaumau. And of course, ultimately, what could happen with that is that if confidence grows in understanding the behaviour, the park may be able to gradually lift the restrictions on how close people can go. So, at the moment, people have considerable spectacle, but they see it from the Jagger Museum right up on the rim of the crater. If we get a handle on why it behaves the way it is, maybe people can go that much closer, and get that much more.
You'll be able to predict that it's not going to explode in their face.
Right, or at least not on a scale that causes them a problem, because most of the time there's no problem beyond apart from the VOG, there's no problem beyond a few hundred feet away from the crater. But we don't know when it's going to do something more powerful, or for that matter, when it's going to shut down.
Now these gases, what are they? I mean, it smells like sulfuric
Yeah, that's the most conspicuous component. Most of it is actually steam, water vapor,
Which doesn't hurt you.
yeah, which doesn't really hurt you unless it's super hot. And then there's carbon dioxide, and then there's the sulfur gases. And the ones that we pay a lot of attention to are the carbon dioxide and the sulfur gases, both the sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, which are quite different in terms of how they behave, and certainly quite different how they affect our lungs as well.
So, I mean, are we able to plot? This is the Precious camera was what, dropped in a hole somewhere?
No, it was sitting on a tripod with a very big lens.
Okay,
on it.
looking down.
Looking straight down. So it was about 250 feet above and probably about 500 feet away from the actual point where the gas was bursting out.
But was just enough information with Precious or otherwise with the sensors, the gas sensors, to predict exactly how the volcano was going to conduct itself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The answer is not today. And the hope is in 2 years' time, we will be there. So we just got money. We got money, totally different batch of money on 5 July. To do 2 years of this work, tying the gas measuring with the high-speed cameras.
And what about the seismic vibrations, I guess?
Oh yes,
No,
sorry, and I
suppose-
shouldn't neglect those. It's simply they have been so well known for so long.
Yeah.
We have with the things we do, we've never had the fine resolution to be able to compare them with the seismicity and the ground movement, but now we've got that, and so our dream, working with Hawaii Volcano Observatory, is to have all of these things feeding into one recording system at the same time, perfectly time synchronized, and so we can set one data set against the other, and they're doing that for everything except the high-speed camera stuff and maybe some of the gas measurements at the present time, at the observatory.
Well, maybe you have some kind of way of analyzing the video, or analyzing the change in the gases and analyzing the change in the seismic vibrations and putting it all together in a huge database,
Yeah.
modeling exactly
At
how
least
it
for
happens.
this sort of volcano.
Yeah.
It won't work
This
for
is a relatively
much
benign
bigger ones.
volcano, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And yet, that's only most of the time. Like, yeah,
Thank
there
you.
are black swan events, as they call them, for Kilauea as
I love
well.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So in 1790 would have been a very uncomfortable year to be around the top of Kilauea. And 1924 wasn't too hot either. One guy was killed in 1924 from an explosion.
Was it on the west side and the Kona side?
They were right on top. They were actually pretty much. You can't use it today, but the car park adjacent to Halimau as you come down from the observatory. Yeah. They were in that area, maybe a little bit outboard from that, during a really big explosion in 1924. One of many explosions.
And it wasn't a matter of lava coming down the road at you. It was a matter of
it was
material
large,
being thrown
big
into the
blocks,
air.
big hot blocks going through the air like missiles, basically.
And then coming down.
And coming down. And this one guy was just caught by a not that large a block, sort of slightly larger than the head-sized block. But
So, it sounds to me like, we're in a new time for volcanology, because these instruments are more and they can be connected and modeled as never before. B, that you have a worldwide community of volcanologists who are looking at it everywhere there are volcanoes of any note. And for that reason, we can get a handle. I mean, even in only a few years, maybe I'm being too optimistic, on exactly how this works and how it correlates with other seismic-like events in the neighborhood, no?
Right, yeah. I think in a few years we'll have a very good handle for this type of activity that you and I have been talking about. So the Kilaueas of the world, the Strombolis of the world, and so on. There are other styles of volcano and other volcanoes that are a lot further away. But it's actually not a bad thing, but again, because of this human factor. I mean, it's no coincidence that the volcanoes that tourists flock to are the ones we're talking about, because people want to go somewhere where they can see something. They don't want to be told, yes, sometime in the next 10 years there's going to be a powerful explosion. They want something on the day that
Right
they're in
there.
town. Yeah, and so there are just a few volcanoes that do that, that supply that. But the codicil is we need to know a lot more about those ones, not because the volcano is more dangerous, but because people are edging forward towards those volcanoes.
Like it or not.
Yeah, and it's gonna happen.
So are we going to have another Krakatoa, Bruce? I mean, is there going to be one really big explosion coming here?
Yeah, on a statistical basis, we'll get another Krakatoa lookalike probably on the century, 2-century type scale.
Not here, though.
Not here, no. But see, as you said earlier, there are people everywhere working on volcanoes, and likewise, any one volcanologist is working in lots of places. Next week, I'm going with one of my graduate students to have a month at a place called Valley of 10,000 Smokes in Alaska. That was the site of the biggest 20th century eruption. Not that much smaller than Krakatoa in many ways. Nobody talks about it anymore, and the reason being there was nobody there. The two biggest eruptions of the 20th century were Pinatubo in the Philippines, and there were a lot of people around that one. And then in Novarupta, nothing. So impact on the wildlife. Certainly one or two fishing villages basically popped up and there was no loss of wildlife. So we pay.
Does a tree make noise when it falls down?
Exactly. But now there's a lot more ears around that volcano, and so significantly more issues. The big issue in volcanology in the last half decade has been aviation, because of the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland in 2010, closed European airspace for a week. Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago, but
Yeah. Now that was 1,000th the size of this Alaskan eruption. So a repeat of that Alaskan eruption would close US airspace, or from any of the other like volcanoes, like Long Valley in California or Yellowstone. Any of those volcanoes, could close down all of our airspace. So we can't turn our back on those, even though Kilauea is beguiling.
I was going to ask you, as I do very often with scientific guests, why do we care? But you've anticipated my question.
Yeah.
It's clear, why should we care? We'd better care.
Yeah, I ran a course with Carl Kim and others in May on the West Coast for high-level FEMA officials and East Coast emergency managers. One of the things we talked to them about was that eruption. And I could see them initially thinking, what's this Kiwi guy doing in Pennsylvania telling us about an eruption from Iceland? But once they realized the implications in terms of the impact, it didn't matter whether it was in Iceland or Morocco or Kabul. The fact is, airspace is so crowded these days. There are so few alternatives. Oh my gosh, I have to divert every flight from the East Coast to Europe today. You just can't do it.
Change everything. Yeah. Disrupt everything. We're out of time, Bruce. Bruce Houghton, volcanologist at SOEST, here at the SOEST Hour, the School of Ocean, Earth Science and Technology at UH Manoa. And we stood for the proposition that volcanologists are not only on Star Trek. We have one right here, right now. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. My pleasure, Jay.
Aloha. Okay, good. Thank you. Very nice.
Yes.